The world is full of surprising details that go unnoticed. Did you know that the Eiffel Tower was almost built in Barcelona? Or that there are more cell phones than people on the planet? Well, there are facts that defy the obvious and change the way we see reality. And the most curious thing, these stories are everywhere, just waiting to be discovered. From a rock band that even played in Antarctica to the absurd cost of keeping a GPS working, each fact has an unexpected detail. Want to know what they are? Then get ready, because after this, you will never see the world the same way again. If someone were to say that it is possible to capture the shadow of something invisible to the naked eye, the natural reaction would be disbelief. But science always defies limits. Researchers have managed to photograph the shadow of a single atom using a highly sensitive detector. This has not only redefined the limits of photography, but also opened new doors for microscopic studies. After all, when we talk about such small scales, even a shadow becomes a fascinating phenomenon. Now, imagine the impact this has on nanotechnology and quantum physics. Being able to see something so tiny allows for advances that, until recently, seemed like science fiction. Think of ultra-precise medical diagnoses, increasingly smaller chips, and even revolutionary new materials. Small details, when observed in the right way, can transform the world around us in unimaginable ways. Curiosity, in this case, is what drives innovation. And speaking of innovation, there are many things around us that we consider banal, but that hide incredible stories. Have you ever wondered how much it costs to keep GPS working, even though it is free for everyone? Stay curious, as this answer may surprise you. It's funny how we use GPS without even thinking about it, isn't it? Whether it's to avoid traffic, find that hidden restaurant, or simply not get lost, it's always there, ready to guide us. But what few people know is that this practicality has an astronomical cost. Keeping the system running costs around $2 million a day. This is because it depends on a constellation of satellites in orbit, ground infrastructure, and constant maintenance to ensure that each coordinate is always accurate. Now, stop and think. If everyone had to pay a subscription to use GPS, what would the impact be on everyday life? Logistics companies would spend more, transport apps would become more expensive, and even food delivery could cost a fortune. But, fortunately, this cost is absorbed by the governments that operate the system, allowing everyone to have free access to a technology that has revolutionized the way we get around. And look how curious. Even though it's free, GPS generates billions in global savings by optimizing routes and reducing waste. But GPS is just one example of how words can be deceiving. Sometimes, a simple name can hide much deeper meanings. Did you know, for example, that the word kimono has a very obvious meaning, but that many people are unaware of it? Well, curiosity never ends. The kimono is one of Japan's most iconic garments, steeped in tradition and elegance. But, oddly enough, its name is incredibly straightforward. Ki means to wear, and mono means thing. In other words, kimono is nothing more than thing to wear. Simple, right? But behind that simplicity, there are centuries of history and a rich culture that have transformed this thing to wear into a symbol of respect, status, and art. While today the kimono is most commonly worn at formal events and ceremonies, there was a time when it was everyday attire. Men, women, children, everyone wore them. And every detail had a meaning. The fabric, the colors, the patterns, even the way the obi, that wide belt, was tied. In ancient Japan, looking at someone's kimono was almost like reading a visual resume, revealing social class, age, and even marital status. This shows how fashion can be much more than aesthetics. It is a reflection of a culture's identity. Speaking of iconic identities, few bands in the world have achieved something as impressive as Metallica. And we're not just talking about legendary successes. They've achieved something no other band has achieved before, playing on all 7 continents, including Antarctica. Curious to know how that happened? Hold on tight, because there's a good story coming. Metallica is not only one of the biggest heavy metal bands in the world, but also the only one to have played on all 7 continents. Yes, even Antarctica. In 2013, they performed a historic show at the Carlini station, in front of a small group of scientists and winners of a special competition. But why a show on ice? Simple. In addition to being an unprecedented feat, The performance was performed using a special headphone system so as not to disturb the local fauna. Heavy metal echoing on the ice without breaking the silence of nature. Now that's innovation. This feat is even more impressive when we think about the logistics. Taking a band, equipment, and crew to one of the most inhospitable places on the planet is not easy. But when you have determination and a good dose of curiosity, barriers cease to be a problem. This event was not just a show, but a milestone in the history of music. It showed that, when you want to leave a mark on the world, there are no limits, not even geographical ones. Now, if Metallica managed to reach every continent, imagine something that has already surpassed the world's population? Well, there is something that has already surpassed the total number of human beings on Earth. Any guesses? The answer is surprising and could be in your pocket right now. Have you ever stopped to think that, all over the world, people are glued to their cell phones? Well, the curious thing is that today there are more active cell phones on the planet than there are human beings. Yes, believe it or not. While the world population is around 8 billion people, the number of mobile devices exceeds that mark. This means that there are more cell phones than people breathing at this very moment. And why does this happen? Simple. Many people have more than one device. Businessmen carry 2 cell phones, one personal and one for work. Some people keep old devices, while companies use chips for various purposes, such as fleet tracking and smart devices. Global connection has never been so intense. Today, practically everything is in the palm of your hand, from banking to entertainment, from work to communication. The cell phone has become an extension of our body. But the technologies that dominate the world have not always been accepted immediately. Believe it or not, the Eiffel Tower, one of the greatest symbols of France, almost didn't exist. And worse, it almost ended up in another country. Want to know how Paris almost lost its biggest star? Hold your curiosity because the story is good. Imagine France without the Eiffel Tower. Hard, right? But it almost happened. Gustave Eiffel's original design was presented to Barcelona before arriving in Paris and, surprisingly, was rejected. The city authorities thought the structure was ugly, expensive, and pointless. The result? The engineer took his idea to the French capital, which, despite also receiving criticism at first, ended up embracing the construction. And the rest is history. Today, the Eiffel Tower is one of the most visited monuments in the world. It's curious how something so iconic almost didn't exist, right? At the time, many French intellectuals and artists considered the tower a metallic aberration in the heart of Paris. But, over time, it became the ultimate symbol of the city. This shows us something important. Innovation is not always well received at first, but time has the power to transform rejections into true landmarks. The same tower that was once hated has become one of the most recognized postcards on the planet. And speaking of unusual stories, did you know that one of the most famous record books in the world was born because of a simple discussion about birds? Well, the origin of the Guinness Book has a curious plot, and believe it or not, it started not with human records, but with a bird flying faster than anyone imagined. Have you ever gotten into a heated discussion about a curious fact and no one knew the right answer? Well, that's exactly how the Guinness Book of Records was born. In 1951, Sir Hugh Beaver, then director of the Guinness Brewery, was hunting when a question came up. What was the fastest game bird in the world? He realized that there was no reliable source to answer this type of question. That's when the idea came to him, to create a book that would bring together the most impressive records on the planet. The first Guinness Book of Records was published in 1955 and, to everyone's surprise, became an instant phenomenon. People loved to know who was the fastest, the strongest, the tallest, the most resilient. Over time, the book stopped being just a collection of serious records and started to include unusual feats, from the most piercings on a single person to the heaviest hamburger in the world. Humans love a challenge and, even more so, they love to break records. It's funny how a simple question led to the creation of one of the best-selling books in history, isn't it? And just as the Guinness Book of Records began with an unexpected question, the search for knowledge never stops. After all, what would humanity be without curiosity? How many of these interesting facts did you already know? The most amazing thing is how small details can change the way we see the world. After all, how many other surprising things are out there, just waiting to be discovered? Curiosity is what makes us go beyond the obvious. So, the next time you hear something unusual, don't stop at the surface, question, explore, discover more. Knowledge is always within reach of those who seek it. If you want to continue learning incredible facts, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Who knows what the next interesting fact will be that will surprise you?